I remember feeling relieved when the door closed behind them, not because I didn't love my family, but because the house finally felt like it belonged to me. It was one of those rare nights when everyone else had plans. My parents were out of town. My sibling was staying over at a friend's place. No one was coming back until morning. The house was mine. I locked the front door out of habit, not fear, checked the windows, turned off the porch light. Normal things you do without thinking when you've done them 1,000 times before. The house settled around me, that soft, familiar quiet that only happens when you're truly alone. No conversations in other rooms. No television murmuring somewhere upstairs. No footsteps that weren't yours. I ordered food, changed into comfortable clothes, left lights on in rooms I usually ignored, not because I was scared, because I could. There's a kind of freedom that comes with being alone in a house at night. You don't realize how much background noise other people make until it's gone. Even breathing feels louder. I moved through the rooms aimlessly. Kitchen to living room to hallway, hallway to bedroom. Every space felt larger without anyone else in it. I noticed things I normally didn't. The way the hallway light flickered once before, staying on, the faint tick coming from the wall clock near the stairs, the way the house made small noises as the temperature dropped. Outside old houses do that. Mine wasn't ancient, but it had character. CREAKS. Size. Sounds. You stop questioning after a while. I sat on the couch with my phone, half scrolling, half listening to the house exist around me. The quiet didn't bother me. It felt earned at some point. I muted my phone and set it face down on the table. I wanted to enjoy the silence fully. That detail matters. I got up to grab a drink from the kitchen. As I crossed the living room, I noticed something small. One of the lights was on upstairs. I stopped, not because it scared me, because I was sure I'd turned it off. I stood there for a few seconds, staring up the staircase. The light didn't flicker, didn't dim, just stayed on. I told myself I'd forgotten. That happens when you're distracted. You flip a switch without noticing. Still, I didn't go upstairs right away. I finished my drink, leaned against the counter, let the moment pass. Eventually, I climbed the stairs and turned the light off. The hallway upstairs felt colder than usual. Not freezing, just empty. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary, listening. The house was quiet, perfectly quiet. When I went back downstairs, I felt calm again, comfortable, alone. That's why, when I heard the sound later that night, my first reaction wasn't fear, it was confusion, because it sounded like someone else was home. Asterisk, the sound came from upstairs. Not loud, not sudden, just a soft, dull thump like someone setting something down carefully. I froze. The house had been silent for so long that the noise felt out of place, like a wrong note in a familiar song. I stood in the middle of the living room, heart beating a little faster than before, listening. Nothing followed, no footsteps, no voices, no doors opening or closing, just a quiet again. I laughed under my breath. Old house, I whispered to no one. Sound travels strangely at night. Pipes shift, floorboards flex. That's what houses do, still. I didn't sit back down. I stayed where I was, eyes drifting toward the staircase without meaning to. The darkness at the top felt heavier than it had earlier. I waited. A minute passed. Then another. Nothing else moved. Eventually, I shook it off and went back to the couch, turned the TV on low, picked up my phone, tried to settle back into the comfort of being alone. A few minutes later, it happened again. This time, it was clearer. A slow creak, followed by another footsteps. I held my breath. The sound wasn't sharp enough to be someone walking normally. It was heavier, measured, like someone trying not to be heard. That's impossible, I said quietly. Everyone was gone. Watched them leave. Locked the door myself. Muted the TV. The silence rushed back in another step, then another. They weren't coming down the stairs. They were moving across the floor above me. My stomach tightened. I stood up slowly, every muscle tense, listening hard enough that my ears almost hurt. The footsteps stopped for a moment. I thought that was it, that I'd imagined everything. Then I heard something that made my skin crawl. A drawer opening. The sound was unmistakable. Wood sliding against wood, slow, careful. I backed away from the staircase without realizing I was moving. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure it would drown out anything else. "Hello," I called. My voice sounded thin, small. No response. The house didn't creak, didn't settle, didn't breathe. It listened. I grabbed my phone. No missed calls, no messages, full signal. I checked the front door. Locked, deadbolt still in place, windows all closed. I stood there, telling myself the obvious truth. There was no one else in the house, and yet, from upstairs came one final sound. Soft, deliberate, unmistakable. Unmistakable. A knot. Slamming. Not. Slamming. Not. Drifting shut. Closing. I didn't go upstairs right away. That's the part people questioned later. They ask why I didn't check, why I didn't grab something, or call out again, or convince myself it was nothing by proving it. The truth is simpler. The house didn't feel empty anymore. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, phone clenched in my hand, staring up into the darkness. The upstairs hallway light was still off. The shadows pooled at the top step, thick and unmoving. Listened. Nothing. Not a single sound. The silence felt deliberate, like whatever had been moving upstairs had stopped, because it knew I was paying attention. I checked the time, just after 11:30 p.m., too early for my mind to be playing tricks, too late for comfort. I turned on every light downstairs, kitchen, living room, hallway. The house brightened, but the feeling didn't leave. I paced, slowly, carefully, every step I took downstairs sounded too loud, too sharp, like I was announcing my position. I stopped at the base of the stairs again. My heart was beating hard enough that I felt it in my throat. I told myself I'd go up, turn on the hallway light, check each room, and laugh about this in the morning. Before I could move, a sound came from above. A single step, not a creak, not a shift, a step. It wasn't on the staircase. It was somewhere in the hallway. I swallowed. "Who's there?" I asked, louder than before. My voice echoed up the stairs, then disappeared. No answer instead. something else happened. A door opened. Not fully, just enough to let air move. I could hear it, that faint, hollow sound of space changing. Stepped back without thinking. My phone nearly slipped from my hand. I glanced at the screen. Still had signal, still connected. I thought about calling someone, anyone, but what would I say? Hey, I'm home alone, and I think someone's upstairs didn't feel real enough yet. Another sound. Something fell. Not crashed, not dropped, placed badly. I flinched, my chest tightened. This wasn't settling. With dot, this wasn't pipes. This was sequence. Realized then that the sounds weren't random. They weren't repeating. They were moving. I took one step toward the stairs. The house responded. A floorboard creaked above me. Not loudly, not aggressively, just enough to say, I hear you too. I stopped. The sound stopped. That was when the fear really set in. Not panic, recognition, whatever was upstairs, wasn't hiding blindly. It was waiting. I backed into the living room and sat on the edge of the couch. Eyes locked on the staircase. The lights buzzed faintly. The TV screen reflected the dark hallway behind me. Minutes passed, no movement. Then, from directly above me, came the quietest sound yet. Breathing, not loud, not labored, slow, measured. I held my breath, listened harder than I ever had in my life. The breathing continued, perfectly timed, matching mine. Asterisk. Stopped breathing. I don't mean I held my breath intentionally. My body just forgot. The sound above me continued, slow, steady, controlled. I counted the seconds between each inhale and exhale, hoping desperately that I'd notice a difference, that the rhythm would drift, that it would prove the sound wasn't connected to me. It didn't. The breathing matched mine perfectly. When my chest tightened, it slowed. When I tried to calm myself, it softened, like it wasn't copying me, like it was anticipating me. I stood up too fast, the couch scraping softly against the floor. The breathing stopped. Immediately, the silence that followed was worse. It felt thick, pressing in from all sides, like the house itself was listening now. Stop, I whispered. The word felt stupid. Moment I said it, I took a step backward. A floorboard creaked. Upstairs, I froze. The sound hadn't come from the hallway. It came from directly above the living room, from the space between the floors. I realized then that whatever was upstairs had moved quietly, carefully, without making a mistake. My phone buzzed in my hand. I nearly dropped it. A message from my mum. Everything okay? Relief washed through me so suddenly it made my eyes sting. I typed back quickly, yeah, just home alone. The words felt hollow the moment I sent them. I glanced back at the stairs. The darkness at the top looked deeper, now thicker, like the light downstairs had stopped reaching it altogether. I heard something slide across the floor above me, slow, deliberate, then dash, a laugh, not loud, not sudden, just a quiet breath of sound, almost thoughtful. It wasn't coming from upstairs. It was coming from the staircase. Halfway down, my stomach dropped. I took 3 steps backward. My heel hit the coffee table. I stumbled, barely catching myself. The laugh stopped. I stood there, shaking, eyes locked on the stairs, waiting for something to appear. Nothing did. Instead, I heard the sound of movement again, not descending, not approaching, retreating. Footsteps moved back up the stairs, slowly, unhurried. Door opened upstairs, then closed. Carefully. The house went quiet. I didn't move for a long time. I couldn't. My legs felt weak. My chest hurt. When I finally looked at the clock, nearly 20 minutes had passed. Nothing else had happened. I told myself the worst was over, that whatever it was had left, that I'd imagined a laugh, the breathing, the timing. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The upstairs hallway light was on. I hadn't turned it on, and from the top of the stairs, a shadow stretched downward, not moving, not shifting, just waiting. I didn't go upstairs. I know that sounds impossible, illogical, like something you only do in horror stories right before everything goes wrong. But standing at the bottom of the stairs, staring at that light and the shadow stretching down toward me, I understood something instinctively. Going up meant entering its space. I stayed where I was. The living room felt smaller now, the ceiling lower, the walls closer together, like the house had subtly shifted around the staircase. The upstairs hallway light stayed on unblinking. I waited for the shadow to move. It didn't. It stayed stretched across the steps, long and distorted, like it belonged to someone standing just out of sight. I took one step backward. The shadow shortened slightly. I froze. My heart began pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I took another step back. The shadow pulled away from the stairs. It was responding. I backed into the kitchen slowly, never taking my eyes off the staircase. The shadow retreated further until it disappeared completely. The upstairs light clicked off. The darkness returned, heavier than before. For a moment, I thought I'd won. That whatever had been upstairs had lost interest, that it had backed off. Then I noticed something else. The kitchen light was off. I was sure I'd left it on. I stood there, staring at the switch, trying to remember flipping it. I couldn't. I turned the light back on. The bulb hummed softly. The kitchen filled with warm, yellow light. Everything looked normal again. Too normal. I turned around. Then, the living room light was off now. A cold wave passed through me. I hadn't touched that switch. I hadn't even been near it. My phone buzzed in my hand. Not a message, a low battery warning. I glanced down, 7%. I plugged it into the charger by the couch. The screen lit up, then immediately dimmed, then flickered. I looked up just in time to see movement at the edge of my vision. Not upstairs, not on the stairs. In the hallway, something passed between the rooms. Fast, silent, low. I spun toward it. Nothing there. The hallway was empty. Lights off, doors closed. I stood completely still, every muscle locked. The house felt like it was holding its breath. I realized then that the sounds earlier hadn't been random. The footsteps, the doors, the breathing, it had been learning where things were. Where I was. I backed toward the front door, slowly, carefully. My hand brushed the lock. I didn't turn it yet. That's when I heard the sound again. Behind me, a soft click. The sound of a lock engaging not the front door, the door at the top of the stairs. Asterisk, I didn't turn around right. Away, the sound was too close, too intentional. like it had been waiting for me to notice before doing it. The click came again, not louder, just clearer. I realized then that the door at the top of the stairs wasn't just closed, it was locked from the inside. My throat tightened. I slowly turned my head toward the staircase. The darkness at the top looked thicker now, heavier than before, like light didn't quite behave normally there anymore. I took one step backward. The house responded. A soft creak sounded from the hallway behind me. I froze. The creak didn't come from above. It came from the floor near the hallway entrance. Something was downstairs. Now, not running, not rushing, moving carefully. I pressed my back against the wall, heart hammering so hard it hurt. My phone buzzed again. The screen flashed once, then went black. Dead. I was completely alone. A shadow slid across the hallway wall, low, stretched, gone before I could focus on it. I whispered, "Please." I don't know who I was talking to. The kitchen light flicked off. The living room lamp followed. One by one, the lights went dark. The only remaining light came from the staircase. That upstairs hallway glow still burned faintly, spilling downward like a lure. I heard breathing again, not above me, not behind me, beside me. I jerked my head toward the sound. Nothing there, but the air felt wrong, warmer, occupied. A floorboard creaked inches from my foot, not stepped on, pressed. The pressure lingered, then released. I bolted. I don't remember deciding to run. My body just moved. I rushed toward the front door, fumbling with the lock, hands slick with sweat. The handle turned, the door opened, and stopped. Something blocked it. Not a hand, not a body, just resistance. Like the door had decided not to cooperate behind me. I heard a soft sound, a footstep. I didn't turn around. I slammed my shoulder against the door. It budged slightly, enough to let cold night air spill in. That's when I felt it. A presence. Right behind me, close enough that I could feel warmth at my back. It didn't touch me. It didn't need to. I screamed. The lights came back on all at once. The pressure vanished. The door swung open fully. I stumbled out onto the porch, gasping, heart racing. I turned around. The house was silent, bright, normal. The front door stood open behind me. No resistance, no shadow, no sound. I didn't go back inside. I didn't grab shoes. I didn't grab my phone. I ran barefoot down the street, away from the house. When I finally stopped, chest burning, I looked back. The house stood quietly under the streetlight. All the lights were off, except one, the upstairs hallway light, still on. I didn't stop running until my legs gave out. I don't remember which street I turned down, or how far I went. I only remember the burning in my chest and the sound of my own breathing, loud and panicked in my ears. When I finally collapsed onto the curb, the world felt unreal, too bright, to open, to normal. Cars pass. Someone laughed somewhere nearby. A dog barked. Life continued as if nothing had happened. I sat there for a long time, hugging my knees, trying to convince myself that I'd overreacted, that fear had taken something small and blown it out of proportion, that the house was empty eventually. I borrowed a phone from a neighbor. I didn't tell them what happened. I said I'd locked myself out. That felt safer. My parents answered on the second ring. Relief hit me so hard I almost cried. "Think someone was in the house?" I said. The words felt strange coming out loud. Too real, they asked the obvious questions. Was the door forced? Did I see anyone? Did I call the police? I didn't have good answers. No, I said. I don't know. I just ran. They told me to wait where I was. They were already on their way back. I didn't go back inside that night. I sat on the neighbor's porch until the sun came up, staring down the street toward my house, waiting for something to move. Nothing did. When morning arrived, it brought confidence with it. Daylight always does. The house looked harmless in the early light, quiet still. The upstairs hallway light was off now. Didn't remember anyone turning it off. My parents arrived. Mid-morning, my dad went in first. He checked every room, every closet, every window, every door. There's no one here, he said eventually. No signs of anyone breaking in. I followed him inside reluctantly. The house smelled normal, felt normal, sounded normal. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, staring up. The hallway looked empty, untreated, just a space. I almost believed it. Then I noticed something small, something I hadn't noticed before. The upstairs doors were closed, all of them. I was sure at least one had been open the night before. I pointed it out. My dad shrugged. Maybe you closed them without realizing. That explanation sat poorly with me, but I didn't argue. They stayed with me that day. We talked, we cleaned, we tried to restore normalcy, but I kept noticing things, little inconsistencies. The couch was slightly out of place. The kitchen chair wasn't tucked in properly. A drawer upstairs was open an inch. None of it was dramatic enough to prove anything, but together it formed a pattern. Something had moved through the house. Carefully, deliberately, that night. I didn't sleep. I lay in my childhood bedroom, listening to my parents breathing in the room next door, waiting for the house to make a mistake. It didn't. The house stayed quiet too. Quiet. And that's when the worst realization hit me. Whatever had been there wasn't panicking. It wasn't hiding. It wasn't reacting to fear. It had been learning. Asterisk. The police came that afternoon. 2 officers. Calm voices. Neutral expressions. They walked through the house slowly, methodically, like people who had done this 100 times before and expected nothing to come of it. And nothing did. No forced entry. No missing items. No signs of a struggle. One of them asked me if I'd been drinking. Another asked if I'd taken anything that might cause hallucinations. They weren't accusing. They were categorizing. I answered every question carefully, truthfully, still. I could see the conclusions settling in their faces. Stress, fear, imagination. They left, without writing anything down that should have been comforting. It wasn't, that night. My parents insisted I sleep in their room. They didn't say why. They didn't have to. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the night over and over again. The sounds, the shadow, the lock. Something bothered me more with each repetition. I hadn't imagined the order of things. The sequence was too clean. Sounds didn't overlap. Lights didn't flicker randomly. Movements responded to me. That wasn't panic. That was structure. At around 3 a.m. I heard a sound, not loud, not dramatic, just a soft click. Sat up in bed. My parents were asleep. The house was still. The sound came. Again, closer this time, from the hallway. I didn't move, didn't breathe, I didn't even blink. A door opened, slowly, quietly, not slammed, not forced, opened, the way someone opens a door when they don't want to be. Heard, footsteps followed, barely audible, careful, measured. They stopped outside the bedroom. I felt it then, that same pressure, that same awareness, like something standing just beyond the door. Listening, the handle didn't turn, the door didn't open. Instead, the footsteps moved away. Up the stairs, I heard the sound of the upstairs hallway light switch. Click, then silence. Morning came without incident. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not the police, because I knew what they'd say, and because I knew what I'd heard. When we checked the house later that day, everything was normal again, except one thing. The upstairs hallway light was on, and no one remembered turning it on. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, staring up, heart pounding softly. Not fast anymore, steady, accepting, that single quotes. When I understood something I hadn't. Before, being home alone hadn't been the problem. Being noticed had. Whatever had been there didn't need the house empty. It just needed time, and it had learned exactly how long that took. After that night, I stopped thinking of the house as a place. It became a condition, something that didn't turn off. When the lights came on or other people were around, I stayed with my parents for the rest of the week. We went through our routines like nothing had changed. School, meals, television in the evenings, normal things. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was waiting, not actively, patiently. I suggested staying somewhere else for a while. A friend's place, a relative's house. My parents agreed. Without arguing, they said it was probably stress, that I needed space. The day I packed my things, the house felt different. Not quiet, observant. Every room felt slightly off. The angles wrong, the air heavier than it should have been. I packed quickly, didn't linger, didn't look at anything longer than necessary. As I carried boxes down the stairs, I noticed something strange. The upstairs hallway light was off. Good, normal. But when I reached the front door, my phone buzzed. A notification, motion detected. I didn't have a security system. I didn't have cameras. I opened the app without thinking. The screen stayed black, then refreshed. The camera feed showed the upstairs hallway, empty, light off. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. The feed froze, then flickered. The hallway light turned on. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor face down. I didn't pick it up. Finished packing without looking upstairs again. When we tried to leave, the car didn't start. Not once, not twice, 3 times. My dad frowned. It was working fine yesterday. He popped the hood, checked cables, tried again. Nothing. The house creaked softly. I felt it then. That same pressure I'd felt at the front door before, like leaving required permission. Eventually, the car started. Just like that. No explanation. We drove away. The house shrank in the rear view. Mirror still quiet, unassuming. I thought it was over. That night, I woke up somewhere else. Different room, different bed, same feeling. I heard a familiar sound, a soft click. the sound of a hallway light turning on. I sat up in bed immediately. My heart wasn't racing. That scared me more than if it had been. The room was dark. Not my room, not my house. A guest bedroom in a place that still smelled unfamiliar, like detergent and someone else's. Furniture, the sound came again. A soft click from the hallway. Outside the room, I didn't move. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't call out. Some instinct told me that acknowledging it would only make things worse. I listened. This house was quiet. No settling noises, no pipes. No background hum, just that click. Then footsteps, slow, measured, careful. They moved past the bedroom door, didn't stop, didn't hesitate, like whoever or whatever was walking already knew the layout. I held my breath. The footsteps stopped at the end of the hallway. A pause, then another. Click, a light switch. The glow bled faintly under my bedroom door. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to disappear. The footsteps returned, stopped directly outside my door. I felt that pressure again, that awareness, like being examined, without being seen. The handle didn't turn. Instead, something else happened, a sound I hadn't heard before. A whisper, not words, just breath shaped like sound, too close, too intentional. It lasted only a second. Then the light clicked off. The footsteps moved away. Didn't sleep again that night. In the morning, I asked if anyone had been up late. No one had. I asked if anyone had turned lights on. During the night, they shook their heads. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I already knew better over the next few days. It followed me, not constantly, not aggressively, just enough to remind me it could. A door closed that I hadn't touched, a light on where there shouldn't have been one, a sound in the hallway at night that stopped when I listened. Didn't matter where I stayed, friends, houses, relatives, hotels, the patterns stayed the same. Only when I was alone, only at night, only when the house was quiet enough to listen. I stopped being home alone after that. I made excuses, changed plans, stayed out late, slept with lights on, but it didn't stop. One night, I woke up to the sound of breathing, again right beside my bed. I didn't turn my head. I didn't scream. I didn't move, because I understood something then. Leaving the house, had it made it worse? Not leaving had made it notice me. After that, I stopped trying to explain it, not to my parents, not to friends, not even to myself. Explanations require the belief that something can be solved. This wasn't something you solved. It was something you adapted to. Weeks passed, then months. Life kept moving in ways that felt automatic, like I was watching myself from a distance. School, work, conversations that blurred together, smiles that came at the right moments without effort. On the surface, I was fine. Inside, I was always listening. I learned the rules slowly, painfully, not because they were written anywhere, but because breaking them always came with consequences. Rule 1. Never assume you're alone, even in a full house, even in public places, especially at night. Rule 2. Silence attracts attention. Music stayed on when I slept. Fans ran even in winter. Television murmured through empty rooms. I learned that sound created distance, quiet invited proximity, rule. 3 took the longest to understand. It only came when I stopped thinking about it. The nights it appeared weren't the ones when I was scared. They were the nights I relaxed, the nights I let my guard down, the nights I believed just for a moment. I'd imagined everything. That's when I'd feel it. Not a sound, not movement, awareness, like realizing someone had been standing behind you long before you noticed. I stopped staying in places where I could be alone for too long. If a room emptied out, I followed the crowd. If everyone went to bed early, I stayed awake. If someone asked why I was always tired, I laughed and blamed stress. I didn't tell them the truth, that sleep felt dangerous now, that unconsciousness felt like an invitation. On the rare nights I did fall asleep deeply, I dreamed of houses, always houses, not the same one, different layouts, different staircases, different hallways, but always the same feeling. Something, learning the space, something patient, something waiting for quiet. I began to notice patterns in my waking life, 2 lights, turning on behind me in empty rooms, doors not quite closed the way I remembered leaving, then the faintest sound of breathing when I lay perfectly still. It never rushed, it never needed. 2 one night, months later, I stayed at a friend's place. Everyone else had gone out, said I'd wait behind just for a bit. I realized my mistake the moment the door closed. The house felt open, not empty, available. I sat on the couch with every light on. TV playing loudly. Phone in my hand. I told myself I'd leave soon, just 5 minutes. That's when the sound came. Not footsteps, not a door, a shift. The couch cushion beside me compressed slightly. I didn't look, I didn't move, I didn't breathe. The pressure stayed warm, intentional. And in that moment, something finally became clear. It had never wanted the house. It had never wanted the night. It hadn't even wanted me alone. It wanted attention, not fear, not panic. Awareness. The knowledge that I knew it was there. The cushion slowly returned to normal. The pressure lifted. The house felt ordinary again. I left immediately. I didn't go back, but that didn't matter, because by then, it didn't need a house anymore. I don't live alone anymore. That's the first thing people notice about me. I always have a roommate. I always prefer crowded places. I always leave a light on somewhere. They think it's anxiety. They think it's habit. They think it's just who I am. They're wrong. I learned something important after that night on the couch. Something I wish I hadn't. It doesn't follow you everywhere. It doesn't hover constantly. It doesn't stalk. It waits for moments when you forget the rules, when you feel safe enough to be still, when you stop listening. Years passed. I moved, cities changed. Routines built a life that stayed loud and busy. And for a long time, it worked, until one night, much later, when I was finally alone again, not by choice, just circumstance. A power outage, city-wide, no warning, no lights, no background noise. I sat in my apartment, phone battery dying, surrounded by silence so deep it felt physical. I told myself it was fine, just a few minutes, just until the power came back. Then I felt it, not behind me, not beside me, within the room, like the space itself had become occupied. I didn't move. I didn't panic. I already knew how this went. The silence stretched, and then a familiar sound, a soft click, not a switch dot, not a lock dot, recognition dot. I closed my eyes, not to hide, but to acknowledge. I know, I whispered. The pressure eased slightly, satisfied. That's the part no one understands. Fear never made it stronger. Running never made it stop. Only awareness mattered. Since then, it hasn't needed to announce itself. No footsteps, no doors, no lights turning on. Just the certainty I can feel when it's near. The air changes. My thoughts slow. The room feels full. It never hurts me. It never touches me anymore. It just stays. Sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet and I forget to keep the TV on, I feel the edge of the bed dip slightly, just enough, and I know I've been noticed again. So if you ever find yourself home alone and the house feels too quiet, too attentive, too aware of you, don't panic. Don't run. Don't call out. Just remember this. You were never alone. You were just unobserved. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Terramouth.